You are now watching a clip from the Inspired by show. You can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel or listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to head over there, leave us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed it, and follow the show. I want to jump back into the acne story because for someone, as I'm sure you probably know, I've suffered with acne my whole life, and I'm now 32, and the doctors pretty much said, you're never going to get rid of it. Now, I'm curious for you, what made that change? What was there one thing or a series of things that you did at that age that actually made that change?
What, that actually improved it?
Yeah.
Well, it's a very different picture for men and for women often. For men, it's just a case of getting testosterone in check. Like if it's too high, then all it does is, even though like hormonally it's the same thing for us, but the actual route is different. So for me, it was working on the glycemic impact of my diet. So I was the typical teenager. I mean, when I think back to what my diet was like, it was atrocious. It was terrible. It was just burger and chips every meal, or weird concoctions that I would make in the microwave with like tins of beans and spices and grated cheese, and it was terrible stuff. So just getting over to a whole foods diet, that was a big starting point. And then really working on how testosterone was behaving in my body. So for men, zinc is absolutely vital, because zinc is one nutrient that really regulates testosterone metabolism. Things like controlling the inflammation with omega-3 fatty acids, those kinds of things. Those are what move the needle for me. But with women, it tends to be a slightly more complex issue. If it's just a small amount of acne that arises during puberty, then it's a very short-lived thing. But when it's aggressive and when it just seems to stay and stay and stay, usually it comes down to ovarian function, and usually it will be linked to PCOS or certainly some degree of like ovarian dysfunction, in the fact that for whatever reason the ovaries are synthesizing. Well, it's not that they're synthesizing too much. Their expression of estrogen is lower than it needs to be. And estrogen is more dominant than testosterone in the female body. But once estrogen gets low enough, then the androgen hormones, like testosterone, actually have an opportunity to become more active. And the first thing that happens to the skin is you get an increased secretion of sebum, but then also the sebaceous secretions become much more viscous. And because of that increased viscosity that comes from elevated androgens or elevated androgen activity, there's a greater chance for the sebum to actually trap bacteria that are just part of the skin's microbiome. It's bacteria that's supposed to be there. It's not something that's just kind of appeared. It's something that, because we're host to a huge amount of bacteria inside and outside. So it's just bacteria that's part of the skin's microbiome. It gets trapped by that very viscous sebum, and it gets chance to actually get into the pores, and then it causes an infection within the pilosebaceous unit, which is the area where the hair follicle and sebaceous gland meet. And then as soon as that happens, the immune system gets involved, and that's when you get the acne lesion. So kind of reverse engineering that, whenever I work with female patients that are over the age of, say, 21, 22, where the acne is still persistent, I'll always look at ovarian function. And even if there's no disruption to cycle or no immediately obvious symptoms, sometimes they'll have an ultrasound and they'll be like, yep, there's the beginning of some cysts there.
Wow.
And one of the best ways to actually tackle that is there is a vast evidence base that shows that high glycemic diets that raise blood glucose beyond a healthy level over long periods of time, can actually start to cause the changes that lead to ovarian cysts. And, there's loads and loads of published data on outpatient treatment of PCOS alongside drug interventions where low glycemic diets have been prescribed. And there's been improvements in the cycle, in things like hirsutism, acne, like skin oiliness. All of these things can be improved.
Wow.
So with men, it's a little easier. It's just like, right, we just need to get testosterone back in its lane because it's getting a little bit too aggressive. But with women, even though it's still a testosterone or androgen driven issue, we need to deal with it in a very, very different way. We need to actually make sure that the ovaries are doing what they're supposed to do.
This is why I find health and nutrition and all this sort of medical science, if you will, and biology fascinating, because for me, I would never go, oh, my skin is connected to my ovaries. Like, to me, that just doesn't, logically, I would never understand that. But I think it's also quite interesting. As soon as you said, oh, it's this way for men, it's this way for women, I'm like, of course women have got it more complex. Of course we have.
Yeah,
Why would we not?
always,
Right,
yeah.
always.